that has grown into a global organisation of over 330,000 of us. Today, more than 175 years later, we've chosen our Founders' Day as a day to consider what has made us, what continues to make us, thrive. After one of our most challenging years, and one of individual perseverance and collective success, we encourage you to take a moment to reflect on our enduring values together and look around at who we are, at what we aspire to be, as we take this moment to say thank you.
谢谢
Grazie.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Deloitte.
For all that you've done this year, for our past, present, and future.
Good morning, everyone. I am super excited to welcome us to the maiden edition of the Deloitte Sustainability Webinar. As we're well aware, on the 26th of June 2023, the International Sustainability Standard Board issued its first two new standards, the IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. As a result of the issuance of these standards, there has been growing concerns amongst corporates and other stakeholders as to the implication of these standards on corporate reporting in Nigeria. And for companies or corporates that have previously used other reporting frameworks, there have also been growing concerns as to the implication of transitioning from those frameworks to the newly issued IFRS S1 and S2 standards. Now, the essence of this webinar today is to actually help us to address some of these concerns. And to do this, we have an amazing lineup of expert panelists that is going to unveil the requirements of these standards, as well as all the practical issues that we might face on the implementation of the standards. Now, just some quick housekeeping rules. Please be seated comfortably and participate actively in this session. For your questions, please make use of the Q&A function and be rest assured that we would attend to them as the session progresses. Now, it is very possible that we may be unable to address all of our questions during the session, but please be rest assured that at the end of the session, we're going to collate all of these questions and send out the responses. Now, just to quickly go through the agenda, the brief welcome and ground rules will be taken by myself, Anita Irete. Then the opening remarks will be taken by Dr. Uwadia Oduore, the West Africa Assurance Leader. The introduction of panelists will be taken by Omombolanle Onowumi. Panel discussions would also be anchored by Omombolanle Onowumi. And the questions, comments from participants would be anchored by Omombolanle Onowumi. And the closing remarks would be anchored by Dr. Uwadia Oduore. Thank you very much. Please sit tight, enjoy the session, and I'll be yielding the floor to Dr. Uwadia Oduore for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. Good morning, participants at this webinar. I want to welcome you all to this maiden edition. Like Anita has said, it's just one of the many webinars and also many programs that Deloitte has lined up as our own commitment to the development of sustainability reporting in Nigeria. As you all know, that this theme we have called IFRS S1 and S2 and other sustainability reporting standard implications for corporate reporting in Nigeria. The ISSB is set out to develop high quality sustainability disclosure standards that meet investors' information and also to ensure that we create a comprehensive global baseline sustainability related disclosures. We as a firm has always been part of this global initiative. And as you can see, we are partnering with a team of experts that are here today. They are global experts. I can tell you, the team we've put together today have been participating at the global level. And because we know them and we have decided to also leverage on their strength to be able to see how we bring them to the Nigerian landscape. As you know, Nigeria is taking the initiative to early adopt the sustainability standards, and we are being looked upon by many jurisdictions as a model. Whatever we do today is part of the milestones that Nigeria as a country is taking to ensure that these standards are well implemented in our own jurisdiction. And I can tell you, a lot of Africa and non-African countries are looking up to us to see how our model can be replicated in their own jurisdiction. Why is sustainability important in business today? As you know, even United Nations defines sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And for businesses, because they operate in this environment, the business must be done in such a way that these organizations don't compromise the needs of future generations as they are meeting their own present needs. Sustainability reporting has very positive impacts on the people, because when businesses follow sustainable practices, they care more about employees, customers, and also the society at large. Even their impact on the environment is usually very positive, because they are very conscious of the environment in which they operate. And for such organizations, they usually have competitive advantage, because the general public or the business environment tend to have trust in them that their businesses are being done in such a way that they do not compromise on the safety in our environment. And like you all know, as Nigeria, we have had our experiences in the oil sector. We are all aware of the spillage in the Niger Delta and the impact it has had. You see, probably maybe if these standards have been operating way back then, maybe we wouldn't have had such experiences. So sustainability reporting, as we expect going forward, is going to bring about very important and very landmark benefits to us as a nation and globally, and also to the business environment. We expect benefits coming from energy conservation, a healthier environment, and also better future for everyone. So for today, I will expect every one of us to participate. We will expect you to send in your questions. And like Anita has said, questions that can be responded to here will be responded to. Other questions will be put in a compendium, and at the appropriate time, it will be shared. So I want to enjoin everyone, be participative. Let's take notes. Let's also listen attentively to the global champions that we have brought today. I can tell you they are global champions indeed. And we've also brought them from several organizations and also regulatory agencies that are in the forefront in all of this. I want to thank the Financial Reporting Council, especially for this very initiative, because the FRC is actually championing the roadmap for implementation in Nigeria. Dr. Ndidi, I want to thank you also. You've been our global representative, and also my distinguished president, fifth ICAM president, Dr. Innocent Okosa. I want to thank you for being part of this program. And Chinua, our good friend, he controls the capital market for us in Nigeria at the exchange. You are welcome. And also Mark Hoffman, who is joining us from South Africa. Thank you, everyone. And I wish you a wonderful deliberation on this webinar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ojurari, for that remarkable opening discussion. Thanks everyone for being on this webinar. My name is Bolanle Onaomi. I'm a partner within our assurance practice, and I'm very happy to be moderating this discussion. It's a very topical matter, and we have on the panel very distinguished ladies and gentlemen that would do justice to the discussion. I'd like to introduce the panelists one after the other. Just as Ojurari has said, we have 6 distinguished panelists that will be discussing this IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 as it affects corporate reporting today. Without any particular order of preference, I would like to welcome Dr. Ndidi Unoli-Edozian. Dr. Ndidi is a member of the International Sustainability Standards Board within the IFRS Foundation. She is part of the standard setting process, and she knows very much about how these standards have been issued. And Dr. Ndidi has a PhD in sustainability and governance from the Johann Wolfgang Goethe University in Frankfurt. She is an alumnus of Wharton Business School, and of course, she's attended several executive programs, including programs from ESEED and George Business School. Dr. Ndidi has published several books, and she serves on several nonprofit and social enterprise boards. And of course, we know that she has made it her life mission to support Africa's sustainable development with the work she's been doing across the globe to support sustainable reporting in Nigeria. Dr. Ndidi, very good welcome to you. Thank you. I would also like to invite next on the panel, Dr. Innocent Iweka-Okwosa. Dr. Innocent is the 59th president of our great institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. He's an alumnus of the prestigious Henley Business School, UK, and a fellow of the Higher Education Academy, United Kingdom. Dr. Innocent has been doing a lot of work on reporting. He is a member of the board of International Panel on Accounting Education within the International Federation of Accountants, IFAC, and he represents Africa and Middle East when we are talking about corporate reporting and sustainability in general. So Dr. Innocent, you're very much welcome. I'd also like to invite to the panel our very good friend, Dr. Ihanye Anyara, who is the director in charge of the Directorate of Accounting Standards, Public Sector within the Financial Reporting Council. Dr. Inyara has been working in several capacity technical advisory roles on several boards, notably the Christopher Inyong International Public Sector Accounting Standard Board that he was on from January to December 2022. He is a fellow of several professional bodies, great institutes, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, Association of Forensic Accounting Researchers, Nigerian Institute of Management, and many more. Dr. Ihaya is here today because he would be leading, he is the chair of the Adoption Readiness Working Group for Sustainability Reporting in Nigeria, and so he will be able to answer most of the questions from a regulatory standpoint. I'd also like to welcome to the panel our friend, Dr. Igazuma Okoroba. Dr. Igazuma is the head of sustainability at Dangote Cement, one of our largest groups in Africa. She has held diverse roles in strategy, project management, social responsibility, and sustainability in diverse sectors. She's currently responsible for the integration of ESG in Nigerian and Pan-African operations of Dangote Cement across Africa. And she is a PhD holder in development sociology, and also she has an MSc in sustainable development from University of Exeter. She is a fellow of the Institute of Corporate Governance of Nigeria and the American Sociological Association. Dr. Koroba actually serves on several boards in respect of sustainability, and she will be giving us her perspective from a private user point of view. I'd also like to welcome on our board today, Ms. Tinu Adeawe, the Chief Executive Officer, Nigerian Exchange Group Limited. Ms. Tinu Adeawe is the CEO of the NGX, the Independent Regulatory Supervisory body that is a subsidiary of the Nigerian Exchange Group PLC, which is a self-regulatory organization licensed by the SEC Nigeria. As the CEO of NGX, Ms. Awe oversees regulation of issuers, trading license holders, and trading within the market within our Nigerian Exchange Limited. Currently, Ms. Awe is a member of the Adoption Readiness Working Group within the Financial Reporting Council, and she's also part of the champions for sustainable reporting in Nigeria in terms of the direction from a regulatory standpoint. I'd also like to welcome to this distinguished panel our very own Mark Hoffman. Mark Hoffman is a partner within our assurance services in Johannesburg, and he has with him over 32 years of experience in corporate reporting and sustainability reporting specifically. He's worked with over 200 organizations in improving and implementing financial reporting, integrated reporting, and ESG reporting systems. He's an active member of the Integrated Reporting Council of the South African Working Group and Deloitte Global Focus Groups on Integrated Reporting and ESG reporting. Mark is a member of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants Working Group, and he was also involved in the development of the JSE 3.84K financial reporting control issuer guidance papers. And so Mark has a wealth of experience to be able to help us understand what the standards IFRS S1 and S2 brings on board in terms of how it changes the sustainability reporting landscape. So we have the panel all ready to dive into the discussion. Like we have said at the introduction, please feel free to put your comments, your questions in the chat box. We will take them as the discussion proceeds. But first of all, to start the discussion, I think I would like to invite Dr. Ndidi to give us an overview of the IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 in terms of background. How did we get to this point? And where are we in the journey to global standards reporting?
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And indeed, you've lined up a significant number of important speakers that have played a critical role in getting us this far. As you already know, as was announced, the IFRS standards were launched in Nigeria and in South Africa, hosted by the FRCN and NGX in Lagos on the 26th of June. So congratulations on being one of the few jurisdictions around the world to actually launch these standards. And that is because Nigeria was also as proactive in terms of stepping up and recognizing the need to be on this train early. And as the regulators, FRCN, and also a couple of other early adopters have said, the way the ISSB is structured is it actually makes us all standard setters because of the very consultative process that has been undertaken as far back as 2 years ago when the IFRS Foundation asked the world whether it should be setting sustainability standards, and the resounding response was yes. As a result of that, we now have standards that actually seek to build connectivity between financial reporting and sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Indeed, sustainability-related disclosures and climate-related disclosures, which leads us to what S1 and S2 are. So S1 is built as the general sustainability requirements. What the standards seek to do is to build decision-useful comparable information and to end the alphabet soup of voluntary initiatives in order to create an efficient global reporting system. We often refer to it as a truly global baseline. And the intent of S1 is really to provide that overriding framework, a bit like IAS 1 and IAS 8, if you know the accounting standards. And S2, which is the first subsequent standard that has been issued and is indeed the first that will come into force, because there is a transitional relief on S1 recommended for at least a year, is that it will focus on climate-related matters. What these standards ask for is material information about sustainability-related risks and opportunities. The definition of material is very much the definition that we are used to with the IFRS accounting standards. It specifically applies various initiatives and standards and frameworks that have been in use in the past, and they've been consolidated into the ISSB. TCFD is one of them that was consolidated on the 10th of July. The SASB industry standards, because the standards do require industry disclosures. And let me explain that quickly. The standards have been built with proportionality in mind. So in other words, that they can be used by both smaller entities and larger entities, and as a truly global baseline can be used across all jurisdictions. So the industry standards are one of such proportionality measures, whereby you can actually pick up your specific industry standards and get to the metrics. Because ultimately what the standards do is they start with the measurement of risks and opportunities and the incorporation of those and alignment of those and the publication at the same time with the financial statements, which is a big shift. What's really, really important to note is that this is actually an ask by investors. So it's actually a very important stepping stone to meet investor needs for comparable information from preparers. And what we believe will happen as an outcome, especially with IOSCO's endorsement, which came on July the 26th, if I remember correctly, or the 25th, is that we will find that one, adoption on the African continent will actually be easier because it's gone through an additional layer of due process. And ultimately, the standards are designed to help strengthen the capital market infrastructure and improve the integrity and governance of sustainability-related information, as well as thereby increase the attractiveness of the African companies to deep pools of global capital, which are so important.
Oh, that's a very detailed explanation and background, Dr. Ndidi. Thank you very much for that. I think the question that comes to mind is, what was the sustainability reporting landscape just before the issue of IFRS S1 and S2? And I think I would refer to Dr. Koroba on that. What's the sustainability reporting landscape in Nigeria just before the issue of these standards?
Right. Good morning. Thank you, Deloitte, for having me on this call. I think this is a very relevant conversation because, as you said, the concerns are growing about the launch of the IFRS S1 and S2. So the landscape in Nigeria, from my experience, is that we have been reporting sustainability for 2 decades or more, but this was basically as discretionary CSR reports. And then the uptake of sustainability reporting, which is now managed by standards and guidelines, would just be a few years ago. And the widely adopted guideline would be the Global Reporting Initiative and the GRI. But we find that the Nigeria Stock Exchange has been one of the main drivers of the adoption of tools, guidelines, and standards for reporting sustainability in Nigeria. And for us as a large conglomerate, we're one of the early adopters, and we've seen how this has evolved. Now, Nigeria has enacted the Climate Change Act that was in 2021, and this is going to inform a remarkable shift. I believe it is already informing a remarkable shift in the uptake of sustainability reporting. Presently, it's about 50% of listed companies from research I've seen recently that have actually taking up sustainability reporting. But with the establishment of the Nigeria Climate Change Council to implement the Climate Change Act, we see that number growing significantly. Now, what I think is going to happen with the launch of the IFRS standards is that we're going to have this last keep expanding to more companies uptaking sustainability reporting. We would have changes in boards, because presently I think we have only about 20% of boards or companies that have boards or management teams that are responsible for sustainability, and the requirements are huge. So I would think that with the implementation of the IFRS standards, Nigeria is moving more towards more responsible governance responsibility for sustainability. We're also going to see perhaps incentives or compensations in governance structures of businesses. I think this is very interesting, not only for businesses that are listed on the exchange, businesses that are not listed on the exchange that have traditionally done the CSR reporting, which is discretionary, are also going to have to look at the standards, because beyond investors, there are more stakeholders that are asking deeper questions. And also the SMEs and the NGOs, Dr. Ndidi talked about the proportionality. Perhaps that's a contribution that this standard might even help businesses to understand the sector-specific needs and interests in sustainability. So I think it's going to be interesting times, even with all of the concerns. There's more learning, there's a deeper understanding of our stakeholders, and there's definitely going to be better increased responsibility on the environment.
Absolutely. And when I hear you say that the issuance of the standard is going to cause a dynamic shift from the CSR reporting style that we've had, I think the question that comes to mind, or what comes to mind for our participants, would be, what are the key changes? What are the key requirements of IFRS S1, for instance, and IFRS S2 that has been issued? And I think I would have to rely on Mark Hoffman with his 32 years experience in this to just sort of help us understand the key changes IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 brings on board as sustainability standards.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bolanli, and really great to be here today and to see such a huge attendance and such a fantastic panel. I suppose the big question when people ask what will be different, it will very much depend on where you're starting from. And we certainly have seen some really good sustainability reporting practices in Nigeria. Some will be quite far down the road. Others will perhaps only be starting their sustainability reporting. But for those that have been reporting for many years, you'll be pleasantly surprised to see that a lot of the best practices, the existing frameworks and standards that have really done a good job over the last 20 years have been very effectively captured by the ISSB as they developed the S1 and S2 standards. So things like the logical flow of reporting around governance, strategy, risks and opportunities, and flowing through into metrics and targets is very much a structure of reporting many companies and groups have adopted over the last 20 years. So this is not trying to reinvent sustainability reporting. It's rather capturing and bringing all of the practices that have been developed over years and getting it into one set of global standards. For those that have been reporting on TCFD, you will certainly see a lot of similarities in the S2 standard, which builds effectively off what has been rolled out under the TCFD as a framework and pulling that into what is now going to be a reporting standard. So this is not a case of throwing out 20 years of reporting practice. It's really about pulling it through into what will now be a very solid set of reporting standards going forward. What is different is that the ISSB have brought in a lot of the tried and tested, rigorous reporting principles and protocols that come with corporate reporting.
Yeah.
So when we start looking at things like materiality, the definitions are incredibly precise, not only in terms of precision of reporting, but what constitutes material information that needs to be reported. Fair presentation concepts, definitions of how to get your reporting entity defined. These have been tried and tested over many years of IFRS being in place, and pulling those principles through into sustainability reporting, I really believe is going to get the quality of reporting under sustainability closely aligned to what we're seeing in our financial reporting space. So this is very much a best of all worlds being pulled into a set of standards. There will be differences, but those are really going to be helping organizations really enhance the quality of their reporting. And those that are mature reporters will really be able to see these standards as a way of advancing and building the sophistication of their reporting. So I'll stop there, but really this is a continuation, not something brand new.
Okay. So, and when you say that it will enhance the reporting, so we now have guidelines that normally we didn't have before around materiality from a sustainability standpoint. We are looking at concepts like interconnected information, matters that were not there, in the standards that we were using in reporting in Nigeria before now. So I guess that's why we have Financial Reporting Council championing this course in Nigeria, because it's sort of putting a discipline around sustainability reporting as we've had for financial reporting. So I'll then go to Dr. Anyara. In terms of what we expect to see from a regulatory standpoint. I know that on various platforms, you have mentioned that Nigeria will be early adopting the standards. What does that really mean in terms of regulation? And do you think that we are going to be adopting or adapting the standards? We would just like to hear from you as our regulator on this.
Thanks so much, Bolanle, and thanks Deloitte for this great opportunity. I'm so delighted because Deloitte is actually helping FRC and the entire Nigerian jurisdiction to mainstream the adoption and implementation of sustainability reporting in Nigeria. And I also want to thank Dr. Gezoma and Dr. Ndidi for already giving kind of insight into where we are going. When you ask whether we're adapting or adopting, let me start from that and take the issues clearer. We have gone beyond adaptation. If you remember in 2009, when we had the same route we are following, there was a recommendation in Nigeria by the roadmap on adoption of IFRS then, which was approved by the Federal Executive Council on July 28, 2010. And that approval says that Nigeria should adopt global standards. Like Mark mentioned, there's no need reinventing the wheel. We are operating in a global village, and therefore trying to do adaptation, adoption of this way carefully in the interest of the investing community, in the interest of foreign direct investment. We believe that adoption of global standards would be better than adaptation. In most cases, if you look at those who are adapting, it's a matter of semantics, removing one word or the other, still talking the same thing in the same way. So for me and for us, it is better you learn it at the beginning and know how to speak the global language at initio. So that's why Nigeria, we are not adapting, we are adopting the standard issued by ISSB or any standard issued by IFRS Foundation as enshrined in the law establishing FRC. That's one. As per regulatory aspects that the government mentioned, and I want to appreciate the exchange for as early as about 2016 or thereabout, they issued sustainability reporting principles. But remember then it was voluntary, it wasn't mandatory. And anything that is not mandatory gives room for not effective comparability. So the thinking is that it will be mandatory. And once FRC makes pronouncement on it, it will become that all entities that fall within the public interest entities definition as enshrined in section 77 of FRC Act as amended will be required. However, that under the mention about proportionality, we'll be looking at all those in coming out with a roadmap, which I am so delighted that most of the panelists here are members of the Adoption Readiness Working Group that is working assiduously to produce a roadmap for Nigeria. In that case, we will be having a roadmap that will be defining the entities that will be transiting or will be implementing based on some timelines. So for now, I see in that respect that the roadmap will be very, very detailed, very elaborate, and we'll be able to do justice to it. Let me hang on here for others. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Anyara. And I'm sure there will be so many questions coming on board for you based on your submission. But I just wanted to go back to NGX, right, Ms. Tinuade, to just get a perspective, because when Dr. Anyara was talking about regulation, it seems there is some sort of harmony in the way we are regulating the standards. But I really would want to hear from you from an NGS standpoint, what to expect in terms of implementation roadmap.
Thank you very much, Bolanle, and thank you to Deloitte for having me on this panel in the midst of such eminent personalities. So NGX, you remember, is actually a young company, but it's actually the DNA is about 62 years. And that's because it's part of a group called the Nigerian Exchange Group PLC that used to be known as the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And so sustainability has been a hallmark of that exchange for several years, starting with us joining the UN Sustainable Exchanges Initiative around about 2012, 2013. I won't repeat some of what has been said so elegantly by Dr. Okorova and Dr. Anyahara with respect to our sustainability disclosure guidelines and the fact that we've been in this space. So it should be no surprise at all that last year we actually launched a climate awareness initiative, and we had the UN Sustainable Exchanges Initiative, the IFC, and the TCFD, the Carbon Disclosure Project, come and train about 450 participants on the TCFD framework. And it was in anticipation of what was going to happen, because we wanted to be right there and able to get on the bus immediately. All the events that have happened this year happened. And then obviously, I think the ISSB and the FRC found in us natural collaborators for what we've done up till now, which in June started with the training on the SASB standards, which we hosted, and that information is still on the website, hosted in collaboration with the FRC and the ISSB, with experts from SASB and the IFRS Foundation come and train over 1,500 participants. And then, of course, the launch that we hosted with the bell ringing. So we've been involved in the education and capacity building. We've been involved in the awareness. I'm a member of the Adoption Readiness Working Group. And our expectation is that as the representative, the regulator of a market, we will be bringing to that working group an aggregation of what the market is expecting for Nigeria. We have, so I like to say that we have an outside and an inside. The outside is our sustainability disclosure guidelines, which obviously need, depending on how the the FRC takes on the recommendations of the Adoption Readiness Working Group, there will be some amendments to those guidelines to fall in line with what is the national standard, so people can watch that space. But also, we have draft climate disclosure guidelines, which were as part of our climate awareness initiative. What we've done is we've not put them on hold, but we've been looking at them in the context of to have it as and we have some expectations of mandatoriness that's going to come out of the FRC. So it's not sitting down, but putting ourselves in a position where we can act once it is time to act, and working with the community, including a lot of the people that are on this panel, to ensure that at the appropriate time, which will be sometime after FRC has announced, and we're in a position to be in global best practice of what other exchanges are doing, and ensuring that the Nigerian market is attractive to investors because they have the decision-making information that they need using our guidelines under the mandatory standards of the FRC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sinuade. And so when I hear the regulators on this conversation, it looks like we are all set as a country to adopt the standards in terms of readiness and plans to adopt. But I'll have to come back to Dr. Ndidi, because I know that if you look at IFRS S2, it's not such a simple standard to implement. There are requirements that requires tools, they require skills, capabilities to be able to effectively report and not be greenwashing. So I think the question I'll ask is, from an ISSB standpoint, do we have a support mechanism in terms of providing tools, methodologies, equipping people to be able to effectively implement these standards the way they should be implemented?
Thank you very much for that question. And actually, it makes me smile, and it makes me very glad, because what we're hearing in the room is we're hearing the exchange, we're hearing the regulator, we're hearing a leading preparer who's also listed on the exchange, essentially indicate how critically important it is to adopt the standards and to make better available information that allows for better decisions by investors based on sustainability and climate-related risks. But more importantly, also, we've heard, and this is very important to the ISSB, beyond proportionality, how important it is to actually look at the business model and build business resilience and incorporate the value chain and the supply chain in the thinking of what that business resilience requires. And that, of course, leads us to, and you were asking about, yes, that there are significant requirements that may be additional for many companies. Scenario analysis is one, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 is another. Also, references to transition plans, which of course exist at a countrywide level, but also need to exist at the company level. And so in this regard, one of the things that the ISSB is doing is building an ISSB knowledge hub, which will make up essentially a good proportion of resource materials that are archived within our organization, of the integrated reporting framework, of the SASB standards, of CDSB, of the recently inherited TCFD as well. To give you an example, building on the TCFD materials, S2 already includes significant application guidance on how to undertake scenario analysis. So for example, it provides methodologies of ensuring that the climate-related scenario analysis is done commensurate with the company's circumstances, and also guides. So in other words, we've also built in clauses like really the use of reasonable and supportable information that is available without undue cost and effort, which is also very important in terms of taking proportionality in view, as well as the consideration of skilled resources and capabilities. So that, for example, when you pick up S2, including its illustrative examples and its guidance, you'll see that on scenario analysis, it actually allows for 3 different types of reporting, ranging from qualitative for those who are just beginning, all the way through to very complex models in a quantitative way for those who are much more advanced, so that the standards, again, have been written to suit and meet companies where they are and essentially guide a process of growth, and a process of growth that will actually also benefit the company and make it more attractive to investors. In addition to the webinars and the good practice guidance, the research publications, we're also building an e-learning platform that will host educational content, which is constantly and consistently being prepared and tailored to meet preparer needs. And so in this regard, it's actually really important to participate and continue to participate as co-standard setters, let me put it that way, in the requests for comments that the IFRS puts out on occasion. At the moment, there is one out there on agenda priorities, which ends on September 1st, which is really around what should the IFRS Foundation focus on next after climate. And it's so important to get the feedback from preparers, regulators, and different jurisdictions alike, because the only way to ensure that we're building a truly global baseline that meets the needs of different jurisdictions is by making sure that we get your comment letters in, because that's how the standards are written. The standards are written based on the input that is received. But be rest assured that working together with the regulators that you have around the table, so Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, and of course also with the exchange and with various preparers, and thank you for hosting this forum, Deloitte, and thank you for being part of this capacity building drive, because it's a steep climb in terms of learning, but the whole world is learning at the same time. And what is definite is that in the standards and in the guidance issued with the standards and the sources of guidance that are made available and referenced in the standards, including, for example, in S1, GRI is specifically mentioned because that is very widely used across the African continent as a source of reference, that we will continue to provide guidance and learning materials and educational materials to meet the needs of preparers as we come across them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndidi, because we already had a question on the chat box around capacity building, and I think you did justice to that. Dr. Anyanyara, we have a question for you. Just keep that in mind. Someone is asking when we expect to see the roadmap, when will it be issued? So just think about that as we continue the conversation. I wanted to go back to Dr. Okrosa. It looks like the sustainability reporting is tilting towards accountants when you look at the language that is used in IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. I think it's more easily understood by those of us that are accountants. The concept of materiality, concept around fundamental characteristics of the financial information being also replicated in IFRS S1 as, very useful in terms of faithful representation and the likes. The question I would like to ask you, what do you see as the future role of accountants in this space? And from an integrated reporting standpoint, where are we seeing the future from that standpoint? Oh, you're muted. Dr. Crosser, you're muted.
All right, I think you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
All right, thank you for having me in the panel. The question of the role of accountants in the future of sustainability, I think is a very important question. And sustainability tilting towards accounting. When Oduare made his introduction, gave his introduction, we were looking at sustainability as all about social and environmental, the care for that. And sustainability appears to hover around that. But what we've seen is a sustainability that is tilting towards finance and accounting. Like you said, ISSB sustainability reporting appears to borrow terms from financial reporting. And so where we are headed to is a sustainability that is tilting towards financial reporting. And that is where the role of accountants come in. When Ndidi was making her presentation, she talked about entities disclosing sustainable risks and opportunities. And IFRS 1 is discussing that in terms of those sustainability risks that are expected to affect the entity's cash flows, the entity's access to finance, and the entity's cost of capital. So when you see these languages, it's all about capital market, which Madam Awe has talked about. So it's about enhancing capital flows. And accountants have history of providing information, decision useful information that aids investors' investment decision. And this is where we're headed to. Sustainability information is seen as information that enables the investor to make capital allocation decision. And for this information to be useful, it has to meet certain characteristics. What we expect, what the capital market, institutional investors expect from sustainability reporting is the same rigor that we have in financial reporting. And that's where it becomes useful. So you look at IFRS 1, you could see that it has characteristics that makes a decision useful sustainability information. And the same replicates what we have in financial. So it has the fundamental qualitative characteristics around relevance and faithful representation. Then it talks about enhancing qualitative characteristics, verifiability, comparability, timeliness, understandability. And that is taking sustainability reporting information to the same rigor as you obtain in financial. Only at that point will investors find the sustainability information useful. So that is where the role of accountants come in. Accountants are the one that will make sustainability information acquire the same rigor and usefulness as financial reporting. That's why, again, if you look at IFRS 1, it talks about sustainability information being reported same place, same time as financial. Only the accountants can make this possible. When Dr. Okora was described as discretionary CSR,
yes,
had
Yes.
And that description, it loses its value to investors. That's why also when you look at sustainability reporting information, sustainability report, what you see are pictures of social projects that have been executed by companies, water projects, road construction, health, and all that. But that's not what sustainability reporting that ISSP is giving to us is all about. It is the extent to which it enables investors to make investment decisions. Because you talk about sustainability risks, they help investors to make decisions about how he allocates the capital. Right, so that also brings me to the point about integrated reporting. Also, when Didi was talking, she talked about integrating sustainability and financial information. And what that has done is that we're looking at a situation where investors are able to show the link, because one of the fundamentals in IFRS 1 is about connected information. Connectivity is connecting sustainability information and financial information. And it's that link that helps the investor in his investment decision making. So the future of integrated reporting sustainability is a merger that we're going to see between sustainability and financial, both information integrated, same place, same time. And because you're not going to publish both of them at the same place at the same time, you are forced to think about the features that will make it possible to integrate both sustainability and financial. Again, that's where the accountants come in. So accountants have a role to elevate sustainability away from CSR decision useful information. And also that brings in the other role that accountants are going to play, trust. If you do not make the information to be trustworthy, to be relied upon, which is where assurance comes in, no investor is going to believe you, whatever information you have in sustainability. And it takes accountants to provide the assurance that's required for the investors to say, yes, what you have in this information, I can trust it. I can use it to make investment decisions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Crosser. I think you've, in just one stride, answered so many questions that we've had on the chat. People have been asking questions about, is it going to be the same set of reports that would have the information? What are the skill requirements? I think you have just answered most of the questions I have on chat. I don't know if I can still have Dr. Ndidi answer one more question around the role of the board. So when you read through IFRS S1 and S2, it assumes innately that the board of directors are doing a lot of work in terms of reviewing the sustainability strategy of the company, the key metrics, the targets in terms of sustainable related information, and that they are also reviewing the risk management processes around that. I know the standard is not asking us to go rewrite our composition or how we look at strategy, but it just sort of assumes that those responsibilities are being performed. So what do you see in terms of, is there a match, especially within the Nigerian context, the responsibility of the board in terms of sustainability reporting and what is expected within the standard? How do you see both?
That's a great question. And everything you've spoken about, governance, the processes, controls, and procedures that a company uses, generally is now being asked to be applied also to monitoring specifically sustainability-related risks and opportunities. It's very important because there are significant opportunities also involved in this transition. And one of the opportunities in transition, of course, is attracting capital flows. The board is already very strongly involved in strategy. and it's now asked to manage sustainability-related risks and opportunities and incorporating that, embedding that in a company's strategy. And of course, from everything that we can see of climate-related effects, we already know it has a significant effect on business. Likewise, also to build these risks and opportunities into the board's processes. We know that boards have a very strong risk management committee generally, and it's just really the incorporation of those. So just like you've said, it's not really reinventing any wheel. The ISSB standards have really been written, one building on what already exists. So take the example of these 4 pillars you've mentioned: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics. These are really the 4 pillars of the TCFD, which have been inherited by the ISSB, but they're also very critical organizational elements that are critical in terms of building a strong and resilient company. So really what boards need to do, bearing in mind that metrics are now really important, and that those metrics measure a company's performance in relation to sustainability-related risks and opportunities, and are required to be published in tandem at the same time as financial statements. That is, of course, once the transitional relief period is over. What's really important for companies to do right now, and for boards, especially boards, because boards set the tone at the top. Boards set the tone at the top to, for example, evaluating internal systems and processes for collecting, aggregating, and validating the sustainability-related data. And that data is not just important within the company, but also across its value chain. I think a previous speaker spoke about how, actually, I think it was Igezema, who spoke about how important that could be for companies to actually better understand their ecosystem and their entire value chain and their business model, and possibly become even more effective in innovating business opportunities. What's also really important, and that the ISSB standards help with, is assessing the sustainability-related risks and opportunities. And in that regard, the industry-specific standards are really important. Obviously, in Nigeria, where we can already hear through this webinar, where the regulators are aligned, the professional accounting body is aligned, the exchange is aligned, and key preparers are already looking to these standards and looking to embrace them holistically in terms of finding thereby a methodology that is yet proportionate, that takes into consideration the skills, resources, and capabilities of the different preparers, to allow for better communication to investors, and emphasizes the connectivity and the consistency and connection between financial statements and sustainability disclosures, so that essentially what we will be dealing with is one, upskilling. That's really important, that we need to work on, not just the companies, but actually the individuals within the companies. Upskilling through a lot of capacity building, so that we're actually increasing our skill set. Again, the whole world is learning. And it's a great opportunity for Nigeria to come out on top. Secondly, in terms of availability and maturity of data, that has always been a challenge. Actually, one of the things that we're working on is making sure that, estimations can be more effective and efficient and reliable. And of course, you already know that the IASB is working on the assurance of sustainability-related information. So it's going to make sure that we're avoiding greenwashing and that we can actually rely on the information that is made available. It's also worth mentioning that we're working on the digital taxonomy, which means that the digital tagging of information also makes it easier to identify information, and actually also easier for investors to access that information. And in terms of the interoperability, which is just something I have to add, because this will be of concern to companies that, for example, are subject to other jurisdictions, and also the interplay between existing jurisdictional standards and the new ISSB standards. Interoperability is a very, very key focus for the ISSB. So it really works on a building block approach, so that regulators can leverage the ISSB standards to build on existing standards. The IASB IFRS accounting standards, which we already use, is a very important case in point, so that the language is actually quite familiar and CFOs can be comfortable to engage and know, for example, that whatever information is being prepared and provided is of relevance and of interest to investors, and can and will unlock capital flows properly provided. Because ultimately what we're working towards is building more resilience into the companies and into the capital markets to ensure that capital will flow.
to African companies and Nigerian companies in particular.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndidi. And you'd mentioned something about making sure that there is no greenwashing and that we have quality set of accounts. I know within the Financial Reporting Council, we have the Corporate Governance Code that spells out the responsibility of the board on certain matters. Now that sustainability is also being in focus, right? Do we expect that this will be called out by the Corporate Governance Code of the Financial Reporting Council? I don't know, Dr. Anyara, would you be able to help us with that? Can we expect some revisions or updates to the existing Corporate Governance Code?
Yeah, thanks so much. Again, the question can have a straight jacketed yes or no. I would want us to look at the NCCG that was released in 2018. Of course, you all know is principle-based code, which takes a lot of things into cognizance and gives a very wide room for accommodation of a lot of things. And even as at that period, if you look at, I think it's principle number 11, it gives room for the governance structure, creating appropriate policies to address specific issues. Again, if you go to specifically principle 26, it talks about sustainability. Even though with what we are doing now, it's not as elaborate as we would want. So my response is that we already have a very solid framework in the NCCG to go ahead and know what we are doing. The document is not sacrosanct. It's not cast on stone that if there is a need for a change, we will not amend. It's a living document that once there are needs for us to amend, we will amend. However, your question, which I want to stress, is that the NCCG 2018 support the requirements of the sustainability standards. And to that extent, I do not envisage an immediate revision or amendment of the code. Again, when we are talking about the sustainability, permit me to say that most of us are narrowly focusing on climate and climate-related changes. Sustainability, for me, again, I may be wrong, has a wider perspective. If you just rush now to change NCCG because of climate-related change, when we are going to a broader term or terminology on nature, what are we going to do? So my take on this is that the board, as part of the principle or practice 11.2.5, says that to ensure the development and periodic review of board charters, board committee charters, and other governance policies. So the governance should be expected to develop policies relating to climate, develop policies relating to other areas. And of course, the 26 I mentioned talks about the ESG. Remember the elements of the governance in the NCCG, talk about gender, talk about all the rest of the things, are going to be covered in sustainability reporting standards. That is why I will utilize this opportunity to invite all of you for a program tomorrow on the ISSB agenda priorities, because it borders on all these other issues we are saying. The biodiversity, what are they going to focus on, so that we can mainstream Nigerian voice into this agenda standard setting of ISSB. So specifically, yes, if there's a need to revise, we will. But for now, the code is good enough to drive sustainability reporting in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anyara. That's a very clear feedback to the audience on what we expect to see. Dr. Kosa, you have a few questions or comments. Someone mentioned that ESG is just comes at the end of the whole process. ESG is about integrating various disciplines, and he was challenging you on the accountant role. But I'll leave that. I know you would respond to that in due course. I want to come back to Mark Hoffman, and that's just looking at everything we have said about IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. The IFRS S1 talks about the presentation, talks about the framework for the reporting, and with the IFRS S2, what you specifically need to do when you're looking at your climate-related risk and opportunities. There is a bit of rigor, like Dr. Kosa has said. It puts some discipline in the reporting process, not just bringing out CSR reports. Now, what is the motivation for companies to adopt these standards? Are there benefits of adoption that they can envisage as reporters, just to make it easier to comply without being pushed?
Thanks, Bolanli. And that is the million-dollar question, is what are the business case benefits, not only for companies, but for countries, investors, and the business community. So there are some very obvious ones. Many have been touched on by some of the panelists, and that's certainly first and foremost is credibility in your reporting into capital markets. And with the adoption of these standards, that credibility really comes to the fore in terms of the quality of reporting that investors are going to see and be able to make informed decisions on. It's also going to bring a lot of consistency and comparability to reporting. So as we align around one set of standards, we are going to start seeing best practices, and we are going to start seeing top performers against particular performance areas. And that will allow those top performers to command a higher share price and more capital allocation in the open markets. There's also some really useful industry guidance. And, I would encourage every business to start looking at how these sector guidance standards are being developed, because those are typically going to be the areas that investors are focusing in on. And of course, businesses themselves should really be paying a lot of attention to from a risk, opportunity, and performance perspective. It also is going to start driving, and people have been talking about greenwashing a lot in the questions, the levels of assurance that one can actually now start obtaining. So as these standards come into place, we are seeing the assurance standards being developed, and those that are watching have seen the ISSA 5000 being introduced by the IASB. And these standards will bring what is known as suitable criteria and allow for fairly robust, independent assurance to be expressed over these reports. And again, adding to that credibility that I spoke about for investors to make decisions. But I wanted to spend 1 minute on underneath the reporting, there are some massive business case benefits. And what we've seen over 20 years of integrated reporting, sustainability reporting, and integrated thinking is when one dives into these standards, this provides an incredibly useful framework for businesses to really get to grips with the really big risks and some of the massive opportunities that are presented to the business in terms of sustainability topics. It also brings through concepts like integrated thinking, that when businesses really understand what they're up against in terms of risks and opportunities, they're able to link that through into their strategies, and recognizing that there aren't silver bullets for many of these issues. A lot of it will need very deep strategic thinking, may entail many different initiatives to solve particular aspects. It may lead to development of policies, and even new business processes start coming into the fore as businesses respond to these risks. And then the standards force the business to look at adding performance metrics to the strategies and the policies and the processes. And we all know that what gets measured gets managed and eventually gets done. And this starts forming a discipline within the business to not only focus on financial performance, but there are some incredibly important non-financial performance measures that you need to create accountability and sometimes even some incentivization around. And then finally, the concept of integrated thinking, which is still very much embedded in the IFRS Foundation, and having taken over the work of the IRC, when one sits and appreciates how these standards will eventually work, the concept of integrated thinking and recognizing that it's going to take the entire business and entire teams within the businesses to understand and develop integrated strategies around what they're developing. So there are some massive business case benefits, not only for external reporting, but very much about better management of the sustainability risks and opportunities by business. I'll stop there. We could go on for many hours, but there is a strong business case driver to this. I think regulation is going to be important, but I hope most boards and most businesses see the business case first, and regulation simply bringing consistency.
So for what you've said and knowing what the standards require, I also see a lot of benefits in terms of corporate reporting at a national level for Nigeria. It upscales our reporting process and also makes sure that we are attracting the right kind of capital to the nation. But I know also there is a lot of rigor in the process, especially when you transition from what Dr. Igazuma calls the CSR type of reporting to implementing and adopting standards that require very much discipline than we're used to. My concern is that these standards are applicable from 1st January 2024. And that means we only have 4 months to implement. So I'll come back to Dr. Igazuma on that one. How ready are we to implement these standards, especially when you look at some of the rigor that is required from a disclosure standpoint?
Right, very good question. But first, I want to address, I've seen a lot of that coming in the comment section. Let me just quickly address that. I'm not sure that the FIRS standard is here to improve CSR reporting. I think that this is narrowing the gap between financial and what some accountants have termed as non-financial reporting. It's not a shift to accountants taking over sustainability. We have contexts beyond quantitative numbers that are best addressed by social scientists who have a broad view of different stakeholders. And Dr. Ndidi did mention that this really addresses investors' interest. In CSR, we actually look at a wide range of stakeholders and not only including investors, but this standard would help investors to relate more with the value of the company they're investing in and what is meaningful to them in terms of decision making. So I just wanted to set that out there, that this is not a move from CSR reporting to sustainability, is deepening. We are addressing more the interest of investors, which is just a fraction of stakeholders that sustainability tries to address. So that out of the way, 4 months, in 4 months, can we get this right? So that's that's very challenging. But first, I'm going to describe what a reporting process looks like. So perhaps you might not be a large conglomerate or a big business, but even for CSR reporting, which I think some people erroneously see it as putting up pictures. No, it is not putting up pictures. Yes. There are disclosures, there are policies, there are statements that your board would have endorsed before you make those recommendations or you made those disclosures. So there is the aspect of engaging your stakeholders. You might call it a materiality assessment in accounting, but we call it stakeholder engagement. You have to engage your stakeholders. When it comes to, for instance, the S2, which is the climate-related risks and opportunities reporting, I have my concerns because the rigor that is required first in establishing a baseline of what we call Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. These are basically categories of your greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm thinking, how many Nigerian businesses in the first place have a GHG inventory? Do you know what your emissions are? Do you know how much methane or nitrous oxide or carbon dioxide? How many businesses know this? I'm not even going to speak so much about Scope 3 because some businesses have first not identified their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And this standard requires that you're going to disclose them. Yes. There are tools, there's the GHG protocol, there are skills, there is staff time, there is software that is required. The rigor of data collection, it means that you're going to work with your operational people. They are the ones who are managing the equipment. So I just, not to scare anybody, but for those of us that have been early adopters of standards, this puts us in a good position. But for companies that are yet to adopt the standards, you really need to build capacity. And I think it begins with leadership, like Dr. Ndidi said. It begins with the board. If the board can approve some capacity building training, and you definitely need a sustainability team that will help you with the data collection and understanding the metrics. And then now you need standards, you need targets. Businesses typically don't want to set targets on difficult disclosures, but now you would need targets so that you are measuring your performance. You have metrics to see your progress towards the targets. So really, I think in terms of preparedness, the Financial Reporting Council has a lot of work to do. And as part of the Adoption Readiness Working Group, this is why we are here, to support as much as possible. Dangote Cement has been leading on sustainability reports since 2017, and we're happy to share resources. If you go to our website, because I've also seen some people asking in the comments if they can find examples. Yes, you can find Dangote Cement's sustainability reports from 2017 till date. That is an example of what it looks like. We combine our annual report with the sustainability report, which people know as the ESG report. It's combined, so it's one document, and you can actually find a lot of information that will be relevant. But what I see with the standards being launched in January is that my finance team is going to have to work more closely with us, and rather than seeing sustainability as non-financial, we're going to all have the integrated sustainability reporting, which I believe should give us some comfort.
Yes, that's the point, Dr. Korba. There has to be a lot of work between the accountant and the other business unit, the sustainability champions. And that's why we are also having this program to sensitize. People need to know what they need to do, and that the work that needs to be done is enormous, and they need to start in terms of making that step from now. And that takes me to a point where I have to call Dr. Anyara again on the matter of proportionality, right? We have 4 months to implement these standards. What would it look like? Are we going to have the largest companies implement first because they are more equipped? Are we going to have the quoted companies come first? What will be the roadmap? What will this look like in the first reporting process? We have lots of questions around that on the chat box, and people are waiting on you to share some thought on what the first set of reports would look like.
Yeah, thanks so much. A very interesting conversation going on. It excites me, makes me much happier because it creates a lot of awareness, it creates enthusiasm, it creates expectations. So let me try to take few questions before talking about the proportionality and what the roadmap looks like. Akin Labi Rahim is asking what the FRC is doing in enforcing compliance with sustainability reporting amongst public quoted companies. In my usual humor, you are learning the rope, and you are saying we should start enforcing compliance. You have heard what Dr. Igazama said. You have heard what everybody is talking about. No, we are not going to have strict enforcement for now. Our focus is to get it right and get it right always. We'll talk about strict compliance that will be sanctioned for non-compliance much, much later. Our focus now is how do we get everyone who is supposed to be on board to be on board. That is our focus, and not necessarily talking about that. Again, that is why the previous attempts by both NGX then and the SEC, even CBN, you know that they were all voluntary. So now that we all are coming together and we are going to look at mandatory adoption, so it takes much effort. Coming to another question, what is FRC doing in capacity building, in sensitizing people? Without sounding modest, I will say that FRC is doing much more in this regard. We have literally mainstreamed sustainability reporting in Nigeria. Since the beginning of the efforts of having a global baseline, FRC since 2020 had consistently engaged the stakeholders with a view towards enlightening them on the efforts we should do. So FRC is really creating the momentum in the country according to the language Obichukwu Nwazota used. We keep doing it, and that was why I took permission from the organizers to still say tomorrow we still have another engagement being organized by FRC. And this engagement requires your voice. We need Nigeria to say, this is the priority area we would want ISSB to do. So FRC is doing that for your own information. Then on proportionality, when people are talking about how do we go, the thinking, which thank God a lot of speakers here are members of the ARWG. So if I'm speaking completely out of what they would want the public to know, they can say one or two things. Of course, the thinking in the group, and by extension, the way we are looking at, is there wouldn't be a big bang. There will be phase-by-phase approach, and which will hinge on proportionality. For now, what are the critical statistics or criteria for the proportionality? I don't know. Please be patient enough to wait for the roadmap to come out in the next couple of weeks. I think the target we set ourselves is early October. The roadmap that will specify all the guidelines will be there. Then once we have that, of course, we will be talking about the time frame. I want to appreciate Koroba again for giving us the reporting process. However, I have this problem of people creating any issue to look as if it's not doable. One thing that gladdens my mind is that we have the likes of Dangote, which Koroba is representing, that I said since 2017 You have been preparing sustainability reporting. The only way I look at it, I may be wrong, is that you have been preparing based on a different reporting framework. Now we all are tilting towards the global baseline. It wouldn't take significant effort for such entities like the Dangote that have been doing it to have a structural shift to utilizing the global baseline. So for me, it's a win. For me, it's a quick win. We have such other entities. So that is at that level. At the other proportion, we'll take into consideration the capacities, the capabilities of these other entities in doing what they ought to do, in fixing the timeline. That's why I said our thinking is it's not going to be a big bang. We'll do it, and we're also being guided by other jurisdictional transitional plans.
Yes.
Thank God our thinking of phase-by-phase approach has been adopted by so many other jurisdictions. So the ARWG will be coming up with what I will call a very durable, concrete, acceptable roadmap that will make Nigeria proud. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anyara. You answered your own question yourself just before you ended on how the proportionality will be applied. You had mentioned large entities like Dangote would find it easier. So I guess for that question that was asked on the chat box, you have sometimes some sort of direction in what you should expect from a roadmap perspective. Dr. Kwasa, you have a few questions on the chat box that I would like you to comment on. And in addition to that, I'll also like you to comment on the matter of skills and capability. It is very important that as we train our accountants going forward, sustainability reporting is part of the discipline in becoming a chartered accountant, because I mean, that's also part of the reporting process that needs to be incorporated into the curriculum. I want you to comment on that and just let us know what the Institute is doing in this regard.
All right, thank you for that question. I want to provide a little bit of a background before I answer your question. And that background information I want to provide is how the ISSB was drafted into the sustainability reporting space. Prior to this time, Dr. Koragwa Oigazema has talked about the different frameworks that they adopted in preparing sustainability reports. So I want to inform that it was IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, that prompted ISSB to come into the sustainability reporting space. And why did IFAC take that step? Again, it is simply because of the fact that sustainability was taken to be a CSR issue. And what we had in that reporting space was a lot of greenwashing. As maybe some of us who are interested in this space know, it's like a movement that started around 1970 that were concerned with issues around social, that later metamorphosized into issues around environment. And those were the concern. But each time they prepare their reports, it is, again, greenwashing. They are not verifiable reports. They are not things you can lay your hands on and say, yes, this is what actually these companies have done. And I will keep saying that because the assurance process is such that there is no full assurance that is given to sustainability report that were prepared. Even up till now, there are a lot of issues. So when the landscape was like going in such a way that we can no longer coordinate activities, and the information flowing from sustainability cannot be trusted by investors. IFAC encouraged ISSB to come and clean the space, and accountants were drafted in to come and assist in doing that. So that's why in the current reporting that we have, we expect a lot of rigor, the same rigor that we put in financial reporting, to flow to sustainability. And that is where the role of accountants are very, very important, because it will help to clean greenwashing that abound in this space. It doesn't matter which direction we're looking at it, from the fact that there are social investors or there are investors that care about the environment. That's correct. We have all such investors. And it is the accountant that provides these investors with the kind of information that they need. So that's what has happened. As for the skills and what we're doing within the Institute, a long time ago, we have already embedded sustainability in the curriculum of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, so that those who are coming into the profession are able to be introduced into sustainability knowledge. But apart from those ones, we also have the one we call Mandatory Continuing Professional Development, MCPD, in which we do sustainability training for our members that are already qualified. And that also brings me to the kind of skill and why accountants were drafted into this space. It is because accountants have acquired the necessary skills because they are experts in reporting in the space they are currently operating, and what the business community and the society at large is for accountants to transfer this knowledge that they have in their field into sustainability space in order to improve the rigor that is required of it. So there are skills that are associated with accountant: conservatism, skepticism, ethics, teamwork, the use of the work of an expert, system thinking. So the new thing, which is what Mark is alluded to, is a system thinking that is now developing, such that when the accountant embeds this system thinking, it should be able to connect the information in sustainability around business model, around strategy, around the risk, which then leads to the KPI that we then use to measure the sustainability performance. And that's what the new sustainability knowledge that is required of accountants is going to flow from. And we have already constituted a team that is already working on that. And so we're going to have a new set of accountants that have developed the relevant skill that no longer confines its reasoning to financial, but also expands to sustainability and connects sustainability to the way businesses operate around their strategy, around the business model, so that investors are in a better position to make capital allocation decisions. It doesn't mean that accountants don't care about the environment, because the new slogan now is that only the accountants can save the world. And so accountants are taking up that responsibility and they are going to save the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. I'm sure a lot of people will challenge you on that. Thank you for the clarity that you have provided in terms of where accountants lie in the value chain. Of course, heavy profession is very, very important and critical to the reporting process. But that perspective would at least clear the hair around the questions that we have received. I want to talk about emission reporting, because I have a lot of questions on the chat box as well. in terms of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions and how that will be reported. If you look through IFRS 2 standards, it specifically mentions the GHG protocol for reporting of the emissions. But it also provides that jurisdictional authority or the stock exchange in which a company is listed can also provide guidance on the accounting and reporting framework to use for emission. So I would want to ask Ms. Tinoade what the direction of the NGX is. You had mentioned that you've done some climate awareness programs and you've sort of started thinking around this, but we would like to know from your perspective, because that's one of the complex areas in terms of the IFRS S2 standards, just to get your perspective on the direction of the exchange.
Thank you very much. It's very tempting to actually divert from this question to follow up on Dr. Okwosa's bold statements about accountants saving the world. But I would, given that we're hosted by a firm of auditors and accountants, I think I would focus on the question that you asked me. The exchange has always been interested in emissions reporting. As you know, the exchange has a collaboration with GRI, which we've had for, I think, since about 2012, 2013. And if you look at the GRI standards, you will see that there is a space for emissions reporting. However, I think when you listen to Dr. Okoroba, and she said it very elegantly, an exchange, especially in a developing country, cannot put its head, and just put its head in the clouds and say, we're interested in emissions reporting, and that's it. And I think a number of people have even talked about how our standards, I would say that the sustainability standards that we currently have, we call them mandatory voluntary standards. If you look at them in different parts, you may come to different conclusions, and we've never enforced them. What I will say about emissions is we're interested. It's in the GRI standards that we have, that we've always, the GRI framework that we've always had advocated, and a lot of our companies report according to that standard. But also the TCFD, which is an underpinning of the ISSB standards, is very, very clear around a step-by-step holistic approach to emissions reporting. And so I don't think that you can avoid it. So in answer to your question, we know that emissions reporting is important. We've noted the obligations under IFRS S2. GRI has always had it. The climate awareness that we've done, which was a training on TCFD, is also part of what we've done to try and encourage people to start thinking in that space. I think the bottom line, however, is that most companies may have an idea of their scope 1. Some of them, a lesser number, their scope 2. Several have no idea of their scope 3. And therefore, as Dr. Okoroba has said, we will be working with the Financial Reporting Council in the context of an aggregator of the ideas, the pains, the challenges of listed companies, to put forward certain ideas around how we can, 1, have proportionality, 2, have phasing, and most importantly, have capacity development. What are the things that are needed? You need the people. Do we even have the people with the skill sets to measure on a large scale if we wanted to do this nationally? That's number 1. Number 2, do we have the software? The software is available around the world. how many people have deployed that software in Nigeria, especially at a time when the entire world is looking to have a reset in January 2024? Is Nigeria, will Nigeria get a lot of that action in terms of the providers of the software looking for places to place that software? I think that's another thing that especially with everybody looking for it at the same time. And then, of course, you may have control over yourself, but do you have control over your ecosystem with number 3? I'm aware of a company in the US that did, in the UK that did an emissions analysis. They did a report and they got their report, and they found out that one of their scope 3 vendors was actually responsible for about over 70% of their emissions. And they immediately took a decision that they were going to cut out that vendor, because if you are responsible for 70%, over 70%, we don't want you. Now, you can imagine in a developing country like Nigeria, if all the companies start saying, we're going to cut out this, we're going to cut out that, that will be a negative effect to the reporting standard. So there has to be a lot of proportionality. There has to be a lot of thought that goes into how this is done. And so we're not in a hurry within the NGX group to come down with a hammer on this. We're more in a hurry to see how we can work together to get people to a place where they're comfortable to start, and then helping them along the way to continue the reporting. Because the deleterious effects of taking a hammer approach because you are a regulator and just legislating it into being because you know it's the right thing will have very significant effects on our economy, on the ecosystem, and will even bring out negative reaction to this positive thing that we're trying to do. So I hope I've kind of answered your question.
You have, and we align with you on that from a Deloitte perspective, the need to build capacity and to have the right technologies. And that's why we're putting the information out there, and also just letting people know that the support structures are available, within the firm as well. We are a global firm. Looking at this from a global perspective, we can always lean on what has been done in other member firms to also support within the process. There's a lot of question around audit of the sustainability reports, assurance over those reports. The reports now supposed to be issued at the same time with the financial reports. Are the auditors supposed to be the same set of auditors? I want Mark Hoffman to please help us. A lot of questions around that in the chat box. The matter of interconnected information and the requirements of IFRS S1 in terms of the timing, the content, and when the reports are issued, the sustainability report and the financial reports, that's given a lot of our corporates. And I want you to please, from your perspective and your experience, shed more light on, are there going to be requirement for those reports to be assured at the same time, now that they are required to be issued almost at the same time, and also having their content to be interconnected, meaning that consistent within each other. So Mark, any comments around that?
Brilliant. Thanks, Bolanli, and huge question. So maybe let's start with the concept of connected information. And that's one of the conceptual foundations in the S1 standard. And that recognizes, off my previous point of integrated thinking, that many of the sustainability issues cannot be solved in isolation. And the S1 standard really calls for businesses to bring together the many disciplines that are going to need to solve these issues. I'll use a quick example. The food processing company that we're working with is running various scenarios on climate change, and one of those scenarios is pointing to severe drought conditions in certain of their areas of operation of food processing. That water availability is affecting agriculture as well as the food processing sector itself, and in turn is linking into some of the food security issues that they're trying to solve. they're developing strategies around that, very proactively looking to relocate some of their plants. This is their processing plants to areas with better water availability, or changing the technology that they use in their manufacturing plants to zero effluent or much lower water utilization. Now, as they're rolling that plan out, there's going to be a clear connection back to financial reporting, because many of those plants which need to be relocated will either need to be impaired or will have very much lower useful lives. And as they have to refinance the rebuild of their processing plants, the ability to raise capital and to eventually meet that financing requirement may even have some impacts on their going concern assumptions. Now, from a reporting perspective, the story that's being told in your sustainability report needs to connect back to your financial statements. And of course, the disclosures and the assumptions and judgments being presented in the sustainability disclosures will eventually need to connect back to some of the IFRS accounting that you're seeing in the financial statements. Thus, S1 calling for the sustainability disclosures to be issued at the same time as the financial statements, so that one can start reading an integrated story between aspects of sustainability and how that's linking back to your financial reporting. Now, your question was, do these need to be audited, and will they be audited by the same auditing firm or even using the same standards? That's up to the regulator, and we're seeing many jurisdictions like the EU and the US moving to mandatory assurance. But to some of the panelists' points, some jurisdictions would rather see the reporting becoming mainstream before actually subjecting it to mandatory assurance. But S1 will require that these reports are issued simultaneously. Your financial statement audit will, at a minimum, under the ISO 720 standard, require the external auditor to ensure consistency of information between the sustainability disclosures and the financial statements. But as regulators and as standards are developed for the assurance of the complete sustainability disclosure or report, those audits will most likely become integrated audits. And thus, the move by many regulators to enable and allow the same audit to carry out the financial statement audit as the sustainability and integrated disclosures of the same company. But I suppose what people need to appreciate is to produce both of these reports and disclosures at the same time will take incredibly efficient processes, systems, controls, and assurance within the organizations to get these reports out on a timely basis, where we often see many sustainability reports being produced some months after the financial information. So a big challenge to get these together and to get them to talk to each other. But again, big topic, let me stop there. Suffice to say that there will be some challenges in getting these reports out, audited and assured at the same time.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I think I note that in terms of having those reports come at the same time, that may be the challenge companies have to start thinking around how to resolve before the end of their financial reporting process. I have a few questions on the chat box, and since we have about 8 minutes to end the conversation, I will just randomly look at the questions and have you answer a few of those. So riding on the discussion about the interconnected information and also having the reports come out at the same time. From your perspective, how does this affect the opinions that are being issued? Someone asked that question to say that can we then expect a qualified opinion on a firm's financial statements because of non-compliance with IFRS S1 and S2, or the opinion will be elsewhere in the annual report of the entity? Fabrice asked that question. Is it something you can quickly respond to? Mark?
Sure. Again, a good technical question. So currently, the way that the assurance or auditing standards are structured, the audit opinion on the financial statements would be independent of the limited or reasonable assurance that companies would be seeking on their sustainability reporting. So I think the straight answer to that is the audit opinion on the financial statements will remain as a separate audit report, and one would see the assurance or external assurance being produced under a separate set of standards, either currently ISO 3000, or there is a new standard called ISSA 5000, which deals with limited and reasonable assurance. So they are different types of assurance, and therefore there would be different reports. However, you could have some matters that are problematic in the sustainability report that could have an impact on the financial reporting. And you could very well get to a situation, for example, a debate around impairment of plant, coming off the example I previously mentioned, may very well result in a qualification in the financial statements and the sustainability report. But short answer is they would be separate reports because they come under separate auditing standards or assurance standards.
Thank you very much, Mark. So I'll just spotlight a few questions, and maybe we can have just responses in 1 minute for each of the questions so that we can go through them as much as possible before the webinar ends. One question for the Financial Reporting Council, Dr. Anyara. Would FRC consider the adoption of data standards like SBRL for digitization of sustainability reports? The Hanan mentions that would be useful in facilitating real-time consumption and analysis of the data. Do you have a perspective on that, Dr. Anyara?
Thanks so much, that's a very good question because talking about sustainability reporting, a lot of issues on digitalization and digital reporting. Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria has been working seriously to engage experts on that to develop what we call digital disclosure platform that will enable entities to report both financial, corporate governance reports, sustainability reports, using global taxonomies like the XBRL and the amended XBRL that incorporates sustainability reporting issues. We are working on that. I am believing that by the time we'll be set to comprehensively implement sustainability reports, we would have gotten that. As we speak, a team is talking with different vendors, and in a no distant future, we'll be making that public and also engaging the stakeholders. We are doing that. Again, permit me to also request that you kindly share, I sent it to your link, your WhatsApp, the link for tomorrow's engagement, ISSB agenda. There are requests on the question and answer that should be shared so that they can register. I will appreciate it. It's also stakeholders engagement. We are not advertising anything monetarily or commercially. Thank you. Is there any other question you want me to answer?
Yeah, I think that's that for yourself, Dr. Anyara. I think the next question is around, someone is asking about greenwashing, and I know we had mentioned a few things around greenwashing. But Ms. Tinuade, could you help us with that question on greenwashing? Someone is saying, what is the regulator doing in terms of assurance engagement over sustainability reporting just to check possible greenwashing?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think sometimes when we talk about greenwashing, we tend to forget that greenwashing is not only in the report. It's not, in fact, I would wager that the most greenwashing is not necessarily in the sustainability report. A lot of greenwashing is also around the information that companies put out generally. And you see that most of the most dramatic fines that have occurred in greenwashing in the world are actually not from the FRC type regulator or the SEC type regulator. They are usually from the advertising regulator. Case in point, for example, the takedown of the HSBC adverts by the UK Standards, I believe it's called the UK Standards Authority. So I think I need to put that out there, because I think there's a little bit of a thought process developing, which I think may be a bit untested, that companies are out there actually reporting a lot of inaccurate information about their sustainability and environmental reputation. So what are the regulators doing? I think, first of all, the fact that we now have standards of an IFRS nature that will be adopted broadly around the world, I think makes comparability a lot better. So the users of reports can now also say, okay, you're a company in Nigeria or you're a company in Sweden, you're all reporting with IFRS, the IFRS standards. How come your own, what you are finding around your risks, what you are finding around your goals, what we're seeing around your matrices is very different from somebody else that is reporting in the same industry, the same sorts of revenue thresholds and what have you. So it makes the comparability, and when there's comparability, I think it's harder for you to get away with greenwashing. That's number one. So just the existence of the standards. And if you look at the standards, I'm not only talking about ISSB, I'm talking about the US proposal that is out on climate. I'm talking about the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. And then I think Mark had also mentioned the issue of assurance. The fact that the ISSB standard actually says that it's jurisdictional. So the FRC may decide whether we will have assurance in Nigeria or not, and what type of assurance. Will it be limited assurance, or will it be the other type of assurance that is the reasonable assurance, which is the accounting standard assurance, standard assurance. So I think that the jury is still out on what will be done in Nigeria. I think whatever the recommendations of the Adoption Readiness Working Group as to whether we should have assurance, taking into account some of all the things that we've said. One, the fact that if you assure at this infant stage, I'm not talking about mature companies like Dr. Okoroba's Dangote or some of the companies that report on our premium board, for example, where this is a nationwide thing. If you decide to start assuring now, what are you going to find, and what message will it tell investors around the world about Nigeria? I think we have to put that in mind as well. Okay. Then who is assuring? I mean, even on this chart, we've already seen that.
It's really a lot of
yes. And do they have the competence to assure? So I think, these are the kinds of conversations that will go on. I always try and put on a developing country hat to an exchange in a developing country. And I think the ISSB gives us enough leeway that assurance is not necessarily the first thing we need to do. That is my opinion. It's not necessarily the opinion that has been ventilated through the NGX group, but as an individual that watches this space and even just listening on this chat and learning from my colleagues, I would be very concerned about assurance at day one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tinuade. We have exhausted the time on this webinar. And thank you very much for all the conversations. It's been very interesting, a lot of questions. Some we were not able to get to, but our assurance is that we'll provide responses to all of the questions that we have on the chat box that we were not able to attend to. It's been a very, very great session. And thank you to our panelists for doing justice to all of the questions that we asked and doing much more. I would like to invite Dr. Durare very briefly to do the closing remarks as we close the session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a wonderful session, and I would say, in my usual characteristics. I have taken lots of themes down for further webinars and also to share with our adoption readiness working group. I want to thank you, every member of the panel. I would say, with the exception of Mark, every panelist here, if I'm right, we are all on the adoption readiness working group. I want to thank you. And for us as Deloitte, we'll continue to partner with the adoption readiness working group to help birth this reporting in Nigeria. And I would want to encourage every organization represented here today in the participant session also to see how you can also support the adoption readiness working group from time to time. The working group will be coming out with programs and also maybe request on you to provide certain information or certain responses. Please oblige yourself to support this group. This group is a group that is a model now to many jurisdictions, and whatever we have to do, we should do to support the group. We will try as much as possible as Deloitte to see how we transcribe this presentation and make it available to the general public, and also by permission of the Adoption Readiness Working Group, will also be referencing this group in our future sharing of these documents. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to future engagement on this, and we look forward to supporting the Nigerian environment and also supporting the global workspace. I want to special commendation and appreciation to NDD for representing Nigeria very well on the board. You see, honestly, the passion NDD has for sustainability is like the passion a mother has for a newborn baby. When you see NDD, discussing sustainability, honestly, in fact, my colleagues in South Africa, when they call me, they always say, "Oh, have you spoken to NDD?" I will say, I will get across to her. Thank you very much. And to all panelists, it's been wonderful. Every one of us here has been wonderful. Thank you all. You've taken time. And if we are to value this time as auditors, I tell you, even Deloitte cannot pay for your time. Looking forward to meeting you again.
Thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you very much.
Expecting to see you tomorrow on the
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
You.
The actions of governments, businesses, and individuals have an undeniable impact on our world's climate, health, and equity outcomes. And the choices we make today will determine the quality of life for generations to come. We believe that a better future is possible. But it will depend on sharing expertise and experience more broadly than ever before. What is required is a profound and lasting change in attitude and behavior. At Deloitte Sustainability and Climate, we help your organization define a roadmap to transition to a more sustainable future. Together, let's reimagine the way we work and build vibrant economies that are sustainable well into the future. Together, let's model new forms of cooperation that identify the best ideas regardless of source, and find new and lasting solutions. The Deloitte Center for Sustainable Progress serves as the home for our world-class thought leadership, research, and solutions that will guide your organization through your sustainability journey using a problem-solving approach that is truly holistic. Together, let's make an impact that matters.